This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 436, part 2, entitled Women's Hold on, I'll go to the top of the flyer. It's a long title. Women's decades-lasting manslaving parasitism of men is a much greater gender crime than men's raping of women. Back to the middle of the flyer. Carrying straight on. Masculists claim that it was men who liberated women from household drudgery by giving women a contraceptive pill, household gadgets, science-based medicine, a female life expectancy of 85 years, so have a career window of half a century. So the masculists push women to fip up, saying that, quote, now that women can work, they must work, since anything else is manslavery. To masculists, fluffydom is manslavery. Manslavery is slavery, and slavery is hated. So masculists have a hatred of fluffies and fluffy feminists and punish them severely by totally ignoring them, forcing them to rot on the shelf. Masculists are tired of the level of effeminate PC ignorance of most feminists, who claim that women are the superior sex, both morally and socially, whereas in reality women have many inferiorities relative to men, the most glaring one being that women have 10% smaller brains than men, which is a lot, like taking an ice cream scoop out of the male brain. That is 10 billion fewer neurons, 10% less neural processing capacity than men. So it's not surprising that women don't build anything, invent anything, create anything. Women are dumber than men by 4 IQ points on average and have a 10% lower IQ variance, so that the morons and the genii are male. So it's not surprising that women have won a pathetic 1% of science Nobel Prizes. Women have 10 times lower testosterone levels in their blood than men, so are much less aggressive, ambitious, dogged, persistent, so achieve far less in the public arena than men. So men dominate the entries in the Who's Who books that are full of the bios of famous people, that is, the great man. But the term great woman sounds almost oxymoronic, so rarely do such women appear. Masculists expect feminists to become biconscious, that is, to have both one's feminist and one's masculist consciousnesses raised. Otherwise, masculists call monoconscious feminists MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots. It's the experience of the masculists that monoconscious feminists are rather feminazi bitchy, since they are angry at men for the ways that men oppress women, which is what feminism has been teaching women around the world for the past 60 years. Biconscious women, however, are much nicer to men, since they have had their feminist anger at men more or less cancelled by a corresponding and oppositely directed masculist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men, and in fact worse than vice versa. Masculists claim that biconscious feminists are happier, since they are much more likely to have boyfriends, since they have lost their monoconscious bitchiness, so are more approachable by men. Real MFBs are repulsive to men, so men punish such women by totally avoiding them, treating them with the attitude that, quote, no man wants a relationship with a misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitch. Such women usually end up manless, loveless, sexless, childless, and live miserable lives, since most women, 99.5%, are heterosexual and rely on men to love them and give them regular orgasms. Masculists want women to vote with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws, especially in the divorce courts, and for the legislation of the para, so that men are prepared to be fathers again. Until the gender laws are men-fared, men will continue to reject marriage and paternity, and whole populations will be wiped out, making the root cause of this population crash the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the fluffy feminist hypocrites who want equal rights with men in the parliaments but reject equal obligations with men by not bothering to fip up to share the burden of earning the living equally with men, by not bothering to become financially responsible fips as adults. Masculists want half of the members of women's rights committees in the parliaments thrown out and replaced by masculists, so that women's and men's rights are dealt with equally, which is far from being the case today, since most people, when confronted with the term gender oppression, automatically and unconsciously think of women's oppression, since most people today are still ignorant of how women oppress men, and in fact far worse than vice versa. ... If you are that masculist in the audience, giving the above diatribe, you might want to finish up by saying, quote, "If you want to know more about MGTOW and masculist ideas, then just use those two terms in the search windows of YouTube, BitChute, Google, etc." In a few years, a feminist who has not yet converted herself into a biconscious feminist will be labelled an MFB by both sexes. Young women will be hating the MFBs as much as men do, seeing MFBs as the indirect cause of their babylessness, since the masculists will be telling young women that the reason why boyfriend after boyfriend refused to give a woman his sperm is that he lives the MGTOW lifestyle, since he refuses to marry and have kids, given the awful toxicity of the divorce courts taken over by the hated fluffy feminists. So young women will redirect their hatred of being denied the sperm of the quality men they really want to mate with, in brackets, to obtain his superior DNA that she wants for her kids. Not so much towards their boyfriends, but at the fluffy feminist hypocrites who have taken over the divorce courts and made them so toxic for men that they have become indirect genociders. So masculists push women to vote with men for the men-faring of the gender laws, or we wipe ourselves out. In closing, future historians will probably see the rise of masculism as having had as great an impact on society as did feminism. Masculism will profoundly change society, forcing women to fip up, to grow up, to take responsibility for their own lives, unlike too many monoconscious feminists who like to blame men for all their gender problems instead of facing up to women's considerable inadequacies and inferiorities. So, as feminists, be warned. If you're still MFBs a few years from now, and you express misandrous statements like those you did just now, then the time will soon come when there will be a dozen masculists in your audience, and they will gender politically harangue you out of the room with masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric. They will bite your fucking head off. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. WordPress website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 430 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.